You look at wide receiver rooms like San Francisco, like Houston, like Green Bay, you have really absolutely no clue what to do with them. And so we attempted to tackle this problem. Really, the only thing you can do is try to back your way in logically to figuring out what these guys' projections from a statistical perspective are going to look like this year. And so we took our domain projections tool created by our own Ryan Bread, shout out Ryan Bread, took our domain projections tool, which takes all of your scoring settings, which takes all of in account to target share, opportunity share, all of your different, yards per reception, touchdown percentage, all of it. And it basically, once it takes those projections, spits out what their fantasy projection would be if that theoretical scenario happened. And so we talked about a lot of these metrics. We talked about, kind of what we'd expect, regression or advancement, or, even just staying the same, and how that impacted these wide receiver rooms. And so do us a huge favor before we start, drop a like on this video and subscribe. As you can see, most of you guys are not subscribed when you're watching this. So it really helps us out. We really want to get this number up. So we really appreciate it if you would take 2 seconds and subscribe for us. Let's talk about the 49ers. This was a team last year that was 8th in the league in rushing attempts per game, okay? So you're talking about this wide receiver room, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, and then Ricky Pearsall. But really, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and Ricky Pearsall, right? I mean, and George Kittle is somebody you also have to consider in terms of, will he take a hit from Ricky Pearsall being drafted? But a lot of people want to talk about Ricky Pearsall like he's going to make a pretty big splash in the offense this year. And we kind of want to we backed into the production this year based on what we saw last year. And let's talk about it. They were dead last year in the league in pass attempts. Do you expect them to be dead last in the league in pass attempts this year? Probably not. I don't think so. But that being said,
it's pretty impressive though, considering what Purdy did from a production perspective. Very efficient.
Yeah, no, it's very, very impressive.
That's crazy.
They threw the ball 491 times last year. So regardless, this is a team where when we were projecting them out this year and we were like, okay, how are we going to, protect their splits? I think we gave them a little bit of a bump. We basically put it at a 50-50 split between run and pass. We said, okay, they run about 1,000 plays per season. But let's talk about some of the theoretical projections here that went behind kind of backing into these guys' projected points for this year. Every year these guys run, about 1,000 plays. They're usually a bottom 10 in the league in amount of plays run. And then you talk about these individual wide receivers. Let's talk about Deebo. So during Deebo's breakout, he had like a 27% target share. And Deebo's a guy going in the second, third round in fantasy football drafts this year. Since Brandon Ayuk has really come onto the scene and kind of, held his own as a wide receiver one, you have seen Deebo's target share hover anywhere from like 22 to 25%. Okay, so this is significantly lower than those years he was pretty dominant, right? It's also decreased each of the past 3 years. So really what you've seen and what you saw last year is Brandon Ayuk become the first receiving option in that offense. Now, it doesn't mean Brandon Ayuk is the first fantasy option in that offense because you do have to factor in Deebo's rushing potential. But with that being said, let's look at kind of some of the advanced metrics that we projected out. When you're looking at target share and how we projected this, we put Brandon Ayuk at a 25% target share, which is pretty much on pace for what he was doing last year.
Yeah.
And Deebo at 21%. Again, this is just really where Deebo has been since Brandon Ayuk has kind of taken a step up as a wide receiver. Now, really where it got tricky after that is obviously you have Christian McCaffrey in here getting a 15% target share as well. George Kittle getting a 17% target share. Ricky Pearsall, that leaves him with about, when you're talking about, distributing some of these to Juwan Jennings, Jacob Cowling, you should get like 3%. Ricky Pearsall's really, there's not a lot of targets left for Ricky Pearsall. And I think that's kind of the first main point in this video. If you're expecting to draft Ricky Pearsall this year with any high expectations for him, I would not. Because again, I think this is going to be a highly concentrated offense in terms of the targets up top. And if Brandon Ayuk is there, and Deebo Samuel's there, and George Kittle and Chris McCaffrey, and they're all healthy, I mean, Pearsall's not going to get more than probably 11-12% target share this year, which is not going to amount to him from a production standpoint having hardly anything worth even flexing this year.
Right, and I think the only reason that you are drafting Pearsall this year, if you're even thinking about it, is one, the contract disputes with the San Francisco 49ers and Brandon Ayuk. You're either anticipating that Ayuk is going to get traded between now and the beginning of the season, or two, you're anticipating that for a significant amount of time in season, you're going to have one of Ayuk, Deebo, or Kittle go down with injury so that Pearsall can rise up, fill that role, and then be productive and take all of that opportunity, which we don't really account for injury to an extreme level when we're drafting impact players in our fantasy leagues, right? Mm-hmm. And Ricky Pearsall is one of those guys. I'm not donating one of my picks just assuming that guys in San Francisco are going to end up being injured, because what if we have a year like last year where everyone stayed healthy pretty much for the most part? Deebo missed, like 2 games?
Yep.
Outside of that, they were fine. So if you're unless you're drafting Pearsall to really fill the shoes for 3 games a year, I mean that's a waiver wire level player that you're drafting. So just wait and get him off waivers in the middle of the season if there ever is an injury that happens. I'm just not accounting for that. I'm not going to project that out. We're trying to project like actual production and actual numbers and trying to be realistic with these projections. And with Brandon Ayuk having 25% target share, I mean, that is wide receiver 1 level target share you would assume.
Yes.
And Debo, again, he's literally proven it time and time again, year after year after year, around 20, 21, 22%. So I think it's reasonable to assume that he's going to get 21% target share as well. And when you're looking at those target shares and how they distribute out, you'd be like, oh, well, if Brandon Ayuk is by far the unquestioned lead wide receiver there in terms of target share, he has to be the unquestioned wide receiver 1 from a production perspective. Not so fast.
Incorrect. Because, again, Debo, when you're looking at Debo's rushing share, I mean, it's typically anywhere from 7 to 10%. So that projects him out to about 200 rushing yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns a year, right? And even just adding that in closes the gap. And so when you're looking at, these guys' reception percentage is about the same. The yards per reception is fairly similar, with Debo's being a little bit lower than Brandon Ayuk's. Brandon Ayuk's was particularly high last year. And then the touchdown percentage being lower for Brandon Ayuk and a little bit higher for Debo. When you're projecting these guys out, however, you'll notice, on our projections, and I wouldn't pay too close attention to the rank because we haven't gone through and done this for every team. These guys are separated by 1 point, and they're being projected both fringe wide receiver 1 range. And so it basically, and what you came here to figure out is, who do I draft out of this wide receiver room? And so here's my verdict, and I'm curious if you agree, because with Brandon Ayuk, you are less worried about him spending time off the field than Debo Samuel. That's the tiebreaker for me, because the price is almost the same.
Even though the price is, Ayuk usually goes about a half round higher.
So in the Fantasy Pros ADP, they're going like pretty much back to back. So if they're at the same price, which in the Fantasy Pros ADP, they're literally 28 and 29.
How about this? If Brandon Ayuk is going in the second round of your fantasy draft, I would probably avoid him there. If he and both Debo Samuel are going pretty close to each other in the third round, I have no issue with you taking Ayuk versus Debo, one over the other. It doesn't really matter to me. Because I do like the rushing upside personally of Debo Samuel. But George Kittle, again, is another guy that we haven't even mentioned here in the receiving stuff, but his rank is great. His price is awesome in the 6 rounds.
Yes.
You're going to get top 5 producing tight end numbers from him in the first 6 rounds of your fantasy draft. That's definitely worth it at price. One thing that I do want to touch on here, though, is if you have super astronomically high expectations for Brandon Ayuk specifically, and even Debo, just remember that target share doesn't go as far as some other offenses because of how little they do pass the ball, which was really, really interesting to me. That surprised me.
Right.
And this makes sense, because how does San Francisco run their offense? Who do they filter everything they do through? Christian McCaffrey, CMC. They give him the ball literally 1 in every 3 plays. And after him, they win games by spreading the ball around. Right. It's not just by constantly going through one player outside of Christian McCaffrey. It's let's go to Kittle. Now let's go to Debo. Now let's go to Ayuk. And then you have the defense running around like chickens with their heads cut off all game because they can't stop all 3 at the same time. And you don't know who it's going to go to. So it works really well from an NFL perspective, clearly, because they've made the Super Bowl twice in the last 3 years. But when you're looking at fantasy, you are kind of looking at a cap ceiling for both of these guys up top in Ayuk and Debo. So just be aware of that. While they might be relatively safe because they're at least going to get a consistent inflow of volume, you're going to have a cap of volume.
Yeah, let's talk about the Texans. So the Texans I think this is an even tougher one to figure out. But we here's a couple notes on how we projected this one out and what we put into the tool here. We gave them a slight downtick in rushing attempts this year. So they're going to pass the ball just slightly more, maybe 10 to 15 more attempts. And then we took into account that Stephon Diggs hasn't had under a 26% target share since 2019. 2019 was the last time he was under 26%. All of you are going to say there's no way he gets above 26%. That doesn't happen this year. I definitely think there's an avenue for that to happen, but we're not going to project it. You're going to give you the worst case scenario for Stephon Diggs, and we're going to put 22% target share for Stephon Diggs. Okay, if he stays healthy the full season, I don't see him going much lower than that. He is probably going to be the wide receiver 1 there. And so we have Diggs at 22%. We have Nico Collins at 19% target share, and then we have Tank Dell at a 17% target share. Now, this doesn't tell the whole story here because these are very different receivers, right? For Stephon Diggs, this is a guy that although he has a 22% target share, his yards per reception projects to be around 11 to 12. So we put him at 11.9. It's where he's sat for most of his career. Nico Collins is a guy that last year his yards per reception was very, very high. We put that down a little bit. We said, okay, well, let's be a little bit more conservative with that and put him at 14.1 yards per reception. However, he has a higher touchdown rate because that's the kind of player Nico Collins is, right?
But we do generally, historically, we see regression anytime someone's in that super high range of yards per reception. They always come back down.
Devonta Smith, Brandon Ayuk, you see it all the time. Jalen Waddle. Tank Dell, same thing. His yards per reception was also very high, 14.5 this year because he probably will be that guy in this offense. And then also a 7.7% touchdown rate. So again, Nico and Tank are 2 to 3, if not 3 to 4 yards higher in yards per reception than Stephon Diggs, and also have a 1 to 2% advantage in touchdown percentage because, again, a lot more of their targets, even though it's less targets on a percentage basis, a lot more of those targets are going to be touchdowns. All of that into account. And again, 22, 19, 17, it is reasonable splits with big bumps for Nico and Tank in the touchdowns and yards per reception department. And let's look at how it actually spit this stuff out because this is where I think a lot of people are underestimating to a pretty large degree what Stephon Diggs could do this year for the Houston Texans. Even at a 22% target rate, that puts Stephon Diggs as the wide receiver 12. The wide receiver 12. And it also puts him 3/4 of a point above Nico Collins, who is the wide receiver 20. And this, look, Nico's a great pick. Nico's a great player. But right now, when you're looking in most leagues at where these two guys are going, Nico is generally going above Stephon Diggs by at least half a round, most of the time a full round.
Yeah, and with Nico Collins, look, I think after seeing a year of what he was able to do with CJ Stroud's rookie year, you expect Stroud to get better, hopefully his second season after having a historic rookie year. But with Nico, let's be honest here, like he is probably going to be boom bust. I mean, Stephon Diggs might even be boom bust in here. Every single one of these guys might be boom bust. But when you're looking at where they're getting the ball in that offense, where they're getting the ball on the field, Stephon Diggs is the one who has shown year after year after year where he gets the ball on the field. And if you are looking for consistency, Stephon Diggs is probably your best shot here. And consistency matters in fantasy football. The closer you get to the playoffs, the more you realize how much it matters.
Yeah,
because you cannot afford a goose egg from Nico Collins or Tank Dell in week 13, 14.
But
14.
I think even
15.
just the price argument here is that Stephon Diggs projects by most models to score more points than Nico this year, and you're getting Stephon Diggs cheaper. So targets in this order: Stephon Diggs is number 1, Nico is number 2, Tank Dell's number 3. Yep. Tank Dell is a guy that he's still projected to be a fringe, like in the wide receiver 3 range. Mm-hmm. For them to have 3 guys that are wide receiver like 36 or higher, that's only been done a couple times in the last 10 years. That would be a historically good wide receiver room season. So I don't want people to say like Tank Dell at 38 is an insult like that. If these other 2 guys are as good as people say they are, and the problem is all of these guys are good receivers.
I like Tank Dell honestly.
I do too.
At price. I think he's a good.
I do too. I'm with you. Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next wide receiver room that we're talking about here, and it's honestly the worst one that we won't spend a lot of time on, the Green Bay Packers, because the Green Bay. I'll let you talk about the projections here and kind of what we factored into this. But
yeah, I think the volume will be there. I just don't know who's gonna really take. I think I know who's going to take over, but I really actually don't know, right? You're looking at Jayden Reed. You're looking at Christian Watson. You're looking at Romeo Doubs, even Dontavion Wicks, all those truthers out there with Wicks, who, does have an avenue, does have a route to potentially increase his production and his workload this year. But I mean, really, what are you going to do when you project this out? I mean, I don't think anyone is going out there outside of the Christian Watson truthers, and he can't even stay on the field healthy, that are going to say that one of these guys is really going to rise up and be the alpha and dominate targets. Like, none of them really play that role, and I think we saw that last year when they were all on the field together. The volume is going to be there. The passing volume is going to be there. Jordan Love, I mean, we're anticipating that he's going to throw the ball, probably 550 to 600 times, anywhere between that area is what we'd guess. Yeah, they're bringing in Josh Jacobs. They're also bringing in Marshawn Lloyd. Marshawn Lloyd is probably going to fill that Aaron Jones role. You're going to see a decent amount of checkdowns go to Marshawn Lloyd. I think even as a rookie, even though it may take some time for him to ease into that offense, he's probably going to get a decent amount of target share there. We actually really knocked Josh Jacobs' receiving upside because of Lloyd, and I think that's reasonable. I think that's fair. Between Josh Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd, they both add up to like 13% of the targets in Green Bay's offense. That's not unreasonable because we've seen that year after year with Green Bay. They love checking the ball down to their running backs and just getting the yards that the defenses are giving them. So with Jayden Reed, We have him projected at 18% target share. That's around what he got last year and ish. And we've got him kind of about the same, with Christian Watson coming back fully healthy, we would expect, though that's kind of a wild card at this point. And Romeo Doubs on the rise, Dontavion Wicks on the rise. Like Reed is probably going to stay around where he is. He's not a dominant wide receiver. So that's what we're expecting from him. 17% for Christian Watson, Doubs 15%, Wicks 13%. There you go. That's what we think about the Green Bay Packers offense this year. It's kind of going to be just with every one of them. Jaden Reed ends up measuring out because of his rushing upside premium, which he showcased last year as a rookie, to be on top by a full point per game over Christian Watson, but that could easily change if Christian Watson can turn some of his deep ball threats or deep ball shots downfield into touchdowns.
And here's the thing, all of these guys are being projected pretty much exactly where their ADP is.
Yeah.
So I honestly don't have a good answer for you here. I lean in the advanced metrics, you see both Christian Watson and Dontavion Wicks get a boost in their touchdown rate. That will boost their efficiency a little bit. But with that being said, if I'm going to bet on guys here, I'm going to bet on the safer guys, the guys that aren't as touchdown dependent. And Jaden Reed, I think he has a play style that leads to being less touchdown dependent, even though he had a lot of touchdowns last year. And so that's why, we'll give him the edge. And I think Romeo Doubs may be the second best value here. But again, this is kind of just a crapshoot. Seattle's is less of a crapshoot, and this one's a little bit more interesting to me. Last year, and when you're looking at even the past 3 years, each of the past 3 years, you've seen DK Metcalf's target share drop. Okay, so for this year, we are going to put it about where it was last year, 22%.
That's what he always gets.
And then it's pretty typical since he had that really dominant year. Yep. And then last year you had Lockett at about 22% as well, and then JSN at about 17%, right? Basically, we're predicting that JSN and Tyler Lockett swap. We're going to project some regression for Tyler Lockett, which we thought this would happen last year. It didn't. We think it's going to happen this year now.
He still did regress last year, though, compared to what he did in 22.
Yeah, he did, just not enough. Now, and part of it is new offensive coordinator, so we project they're going to pass the ball a little bit more.
Yeah, Ryan Grubb is in. Shane Waldron's out. That's a big deal. Don't overlook
With that being said, DK and JSN at 22%, Tyler Lockett at 17%. And again, you've got Tyler Lockett and you've got DK Metcalf having a much higher touchdown rate than Jackson Smith-Njigba, because Jackson Smith-Njigba is not going to score that many points. However, you should expect to see a second-year jump for Jackson Smith-Njigba in terms of efficiency, which is why last year where you saw him average 10 yards per reception, you can expect that to go up, and what we projected it this year was 11.7. I think it's a very conservative jump in efficiency. And also, with the 22% target share, he gets 30 more targets than he gets last year, which if he's utilized correctly, I think that's more than reasonable. So what this spit out when we kind of adjusted these efficiency metrics for JSN, 87 receptions for 1,027 yards, 6 touchdowns, 13.3 points per game in fantasy. That puts him in the wide receiver 20 to 24 range. Right now, JSN is being drafted in the 40s. JSN is the best value and the best pick on the Seattle Seahawks offense this year for us. Yeah. And then it's probably got to be DK, because DK, you always know what you're going to get. Right? I'll take DK just because I know what I'm getting from him. Yep. And then probably Tyler Lockett after that. Now, let's talk about a harder one than this one, in my opinion, and that's Kansas City. We just don't know with Kansas City.
Yeah, I think what you do know with Kansas City is that Travis Kelce's always going to get his own in that offense. Even in down years, he's still productive. He's still going to be good. He's still going to command a lot of targets there. And if you're going to project that Travis Kelce is going to fall off a cliff, I don't know what to tell you. The dude's the best tight end in the history of the NFL. Like, he's going to be productive until he retires. So we're giving Travis Kelce his own. We're giving him a fair amount of that target share. And then really what we found here, as much as we like the potential upside of Hollywood Brown in this offense, I think Rashee Rice is the clear screaming value here, because he is a slot wide receiver. And no matter how we realistically cut it in this offense with the splits, Rashee Rice was by far the safest guy. His floor is unbelievably high because he is the slot wide receiver. He has those targets on lockdown. His target share in limited opportunities last year was unbelievable, incredibly impressive, and his yak ability was third in the league among wide receivers last year. Third as a rookie wide receiver. Over 600 yards of yards after catch. So Rashee Rice, to me, was the big star of the show with these projections. If you're going to tell us to tell you who's going to end up being the lead wide receiver there and who's going to really emerge and be dominant there, I couldn't tell you. And honestly, if it ends up pretty well spread out, I wouldn't be surprised, because I think Xavier Worthy can make a dent in that offense. I think Hollywood Brown could be really, really good with a really good quarterback in Patrick Mahomes that he's never had before. He's had Kyler and Lamar, and that's really nice, but not this type of offense that could utilize him in a way where he could be a really productive wide receiver. But I'll tell you what, man, if you're looking for safety and you're looking for guarantees, you need to be taking Rashee Rice at a discount because this suspension stuff is kind of gone overboard.
Because here's the thing. Patrick Mahomes is always going to spread the ball around, right? But the amount of other targets in this offense, so guys like Watson, Hardman, Tony, Sky Moore, that's going to go down, and you're going to see a higher concentration of targets among some actually decent wide receivers this year. The last 2 years, really, they've been rolling with some really terrible wide receivers, honestly.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I think there is room for all these guys to produce a little bit. And with Rashee Rice specifically, I mean, he's got the lowest amount of yards per reception because he's a slot wide receiver. He also has the lowest touchdown percentage because he's a slot wide receiver. But his reception percentage is so high relative to the number of targets he gets that it put him 25, 30 points above Hollywood every single time.
You couldn't bring him down if you wanted to.
And Hollywood historically has had a fairly low reception percentage, honestly. And so, before this, I probably would have projected Hollywood Brown to be the wide receiver one there. And after running, I've changed my mind. There's enough of a cushion here to where I think it's in the, the most likely range of outcome is that it's Rashee Rice again. Yep. And again, not accounting for suspension. The last room we're looking at here is Chicago. And this one is tough because you really just don't know. Keenan Allen's a guy who had a 30+% target share last year. DJ Moore was a guy also that was really, really dominant. And so in terms of projecting them this year, and then Rome Odunze, who's obviously a wild card. But in terms of projecting them this year, this was a lot of speculation. We went ahead and put DJ Moore as the wide receiver one from a target share perspective with 25% target share, but we gave Keenan Allen 22%. And it sucks because this is cutting his target share 10%. But the reality of it is, DeAndre Swift's going to get a little bit of targets. We have 10% for him. Cole Kmet's, we've got him dropping to 12%. And you still really have not that much to go between Allen and Odunze. I mean, we've got Odunze at a 16% target share. And we were talking about this earlier. Would we be overly surprised if Rome Odunze ended up being the wide receiver one in this offense? Not really. I think he has that upside. And so with that being said,
it was also hard to keep DJ Moore outside of the top 12.
We can't.
Producing at the wide receiver position, which was crazy because we brought down his target share significantly, anticipating that Keenan Allen and Rome were going to eat into that volume, but you're getting increased volume, passing volume with Caleb Williams compared to Justin Fields. So it really kind of just ended up being a net zero thing for DJ Moore, not to mention the heavy investment that the Bears just put into him. And I think that kind of demonstrates how they want to utilize him for the foreseeable future. And that is, he could be the guy. He could be the number one target, especially this year as Rome Odunze is figuring it out in the NFL, and Keenan Allen's kind of, you would expect on a downward trend, even though he had a 32% target share last year. DJ Moore, I kind of changed my mood on DJ Moore this year in fantasy as well, because I thought he was super risky, kind of want to avoid him, but at price compared to what he's realistically going to do from a production perspective with the volume there, I think he's worth taking a shot on at price.
I don't know. This probably shouldn't surprise us. He was a wide receiver one last year, and this team has a new offensive coordinator, a better quarterback, and is going to pass the ball more. We really don't think he could build on or not at least repeat what he did last year. And every time we put him out in the projections, we're getting 15 points per game.
Let me say, it is DJ Moore is the reason, along with a number of other receivers, that I am very comfortable this year going hero or double running back.
I agree with that. Because, again, I think DJ Moore has as high upside as anybody in the second round, and you're getting him in the third or fourth. So, again, Keenan Allen, we've still got him at 13.5 points per game. He still projects to be a wide receiver 2, which I think is plenty reasonable for Keenan Allen. And then Rome Odunze. And Rome Odunze, in this projection, he projects to be like a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5. And I think it's possible. I think it's also possible he's a wide receiver 2. I just don't know with Rome. What I am confident in is unless Rome is really, really dominant, I think you'll see DJ Moore get the majority of these targets, and I think he's going to be the guy here. So again, that's us attempting to, not giving you hey, this is exactly how it's going to be, because if we knew that, we'd be rich and we wouldn't be making stupid YouTube videos. So this is how, again, these are some possible scenarios this year, and we wanted to bring these to your attention and kind of see what you think. So drop in the comments what you think. What do you think we should move around in the projections? What do you think is going to change? What do you think in these situations do you think we missed? So just let us know, because again, this is not us saying this is how it's going to be. This is us being well, what if this happened? This would be interesting. So make sure you drop a like on this video. Make sure you subscribe if you play fantasy football. Those two things help us out immensely. Flockfantasy.com/domain. Get our draft guide, get our league projections tool that we talked about in this video, and also get our fantasy football rankings. You get all that when you use code domain and sign up for the Mother Flock tier on flockfantasy.com/domain. Links in the description. Link is also in the comment section. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you later.